on this. Okay, then, Noam, well, it's great to talk to you. I don't know if you saw that list I sent you, but let's talk about linguistics first.
Okay.
And I mainly refer to your Why Only Us book with Berwick. But anyway, let's start with this.
Down, Gus. Just a minute. I gotta shut up my dog. Down,
Okay.
down, Gus.
Yes, I'm here. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Valeria.
I've got two cats. They might cause a bit of noise every now and then.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, with the idea of merge, merge and merge what? What you called word-like atomic elements. And you say basically that this is still a mystery where they come from, how they're generated. I'm just wondering if, like I do, like Fujita's idea that merge itself has enabled the labeling of actions and objects, which before merge, there was no reason to have a lexicon whatsoever, just like animal in the animal world. What do you think about that?
Well, I think I've written a little about it. It's a reasonable speculation that there were some elementary proto-linguistic concepts, basic notions like action, agent action, things like instrument, things like that. Once you had recursive enumeration, you suddenly get a rich array of potential expressions, and could be that created the background for the appearance of actual human concepts. Their origins are totally unknown. I mean, there's no counterpart in the animal world, any of our elementary concepts. And there's no indication that anything existed before modern humans came along. So we're left with a kind of mystery for the origins of concepts. It could be that they, as you say, that the framework within which they could emerge developed once you had recursive enumeration. Before that, you just had grunts, essentially, what a chimpanzee has.
Yes. Yes. So, as you say, I mean, like action concepts, which became verbs, and objects, which became nouns, so to speak. Now, if we then go on to the next step, so when merge happens, you then say that it's the internal language that sets up the structures, and then the externalization has various constraints, like displacement, etc. Do you think there are internal language expressions which more or less match the external expression because there might not be any reason for any displacement?
Well, displacement is a part of the internal language. That's just available automatically once you have binary set formation. Then you automatically have the option that one of the two is a term of the other one. That's just available. But we now have a certain amount of evidence about the distinction between the internal language, which is probably pretty uniform among human, and the externalization, which of course varies, at least superficially, in thousands of ways, but there's a pretty sharp break between them. So the internal system, we have good evidence that it avoids linear order totally, just deals with abstract structures. The external systems, of course, have ordering of one kind or another, just because of the nature of the sensory motor apparatus, which can't deal with structures. So the task for the language learner basically is to match the internal language against whatever the ambient language is by finding a way of connecting the two through particular choice of phonology and so on. And about that, there's some interesting work recently. So there's, the plausible approach to this, only plausible approach has been the principles and parameters approach. But the problem with that was that there are many different parameters, which gives you an enormous number of choices. So the problem was, how does an infant work through the range of options in a feasible manner? And there's very interesting work on this mainly by Ian Roberts, a linguist at Cambridge, UK, Cambridge University. He's shown, with studying thousands of typologically different languages, that quite simple algorithms with a plausible cognitive basis lead you to zero in pretty quickly on a specific array of parameters, which fixes an external language. His book has a book on this about 2 or 3 years ago, which is very exciting work. And as I say, has a very wide range of empirical evidence. There's also other work by Pino Longobardi he's now at York University, who's also has done quite interesting work with about dozens, maybe 70 or 80 parameters of compare. He's done work showing that if you look at the values of parameters in different languages closely using careful statistical measures, you can get quite an accurate account of the history of languages going back very far and more refined than standard techniques of historical linguistics. So there is quite a lot of important work on these issues, all within externalization.
Okay. The idea then that there's the third component, which you say is the conceptual system, or basically the idea of what do you say? It's a conceptual system for inference, interpretation, planning, and the organization of action. To my mind, all of these conceptual systems are actually mediated by language. So why do you have this as a separate system?
Well, they may be mediated by language, but they're not language. So the act of planning or reflection may use language, but it's something different from language. Language alone doesn't yield my decision to take a walk later. That's something else.
But isn't that what you are thinking in terms of planning, that this is a thought in your head that you will take a walk later on?
That's formulated, a thought that's linguistically formulated, but the language itself doesn't yield that particular decision. I mean, it just says there's infinitely many possible thoughts. You pick the one you want. We don't understand anything about how particular, take what we're doing right now, producing sentences. Nobody has any idea how that's done. Nothing, you know.
Is that a bit like internal performance, so to speak?
It's basically it's voluntary action. You're picking, I mean, if I take something even as simple as lifting my finger, there aren't an infinite and unbounded number of choices. Like I can't make my finger fly into the air, let's say, but I can lift it or move it or something. How you make those choices, nobody has any idea about.
If we were to equate language and thought and postulate that language gave rise to cognition, then we could replace cogito ergo sum with loquor ergo sum. Do you think that that is a possibility?
Well, that was the general assumption in Descartes' time, in fact. The general assumption going back to classical Greece, in fact, classical India as well, was that language and thought are virtually identical. Language generates thought, thought is what is generated by language.
Yes.
But that leaves you without any insight at all into how thought is used.
Okay, just getting back to some questions of that this internal structure can give rise to ambiguity, like your sentence, birds that fly intuitively, instinctively swim or whatever. Sort of structural ambiguity. How is it then resolved? Is that just purely pragmatic, or are there further rules that we can resolve ambiguity?
Well, when we're actually using language, we rarely even notice the ambiguity because there's enough richness in the context and environment to lead us to anticipate what the meanings probably are. So it's all unconscious and instantaneous and reflexive, but there can be cases where you can really be puzzled by the ambiguity. You don't know what it means, what the author meant, but that's rare because context is usually quite rich. And if I hear they are flying planes, I know pretty well either we're talking about the pilots or those things up there.
So what do you think about experimentation where you ask for judgments by just providing a sentence? Say, for example, the emperor commanded his architect to build a palace for himself, where some participants might get confused about the reflexive, that the reflexive could refer to the emperor rather than syntactically to the architect.
Yeah, we could, if we said the emperor convinced the architect to build a palace for his next exhibition, we would assume it's the architect, although it's still ambiguous.
Yes, yes. So are you saying that in terms of judgment experiments, one should provide context, or you should just give single sentences without context? Is that a fruitful exercise?
Depends what the goal of the experiment is. If you want to get a specific answer, you have to provide context. If you're trying to find out what the range of interpretations is, you don't provide context.
Okay. So if we are saying that the internal language, is that can that still be equated with what you call the logical form?
Well, the logical, I mean, part of the internal language, The internal language just says, here's the potential array of structured expressions. They're in what's called logical form. They're in a form in which the other cognitive systems can interpret them and use them. So the system of planning, let's say, whatever it is, it can access these expressions. And of course, it's what it accesses is their logical form, not the internal structure. And then it uses those to execute its planning decisions.
So is that where if this is used in communication, is that where misunderstandings can arise, that the listener cannot clearly match the logical form of the speaker?
It's one of the kinds, or else you can match it and you don't understand how it fits into the context or what the point of it is. Or maybe you reinterpret what you hear in terms of your own beliefs and expressions. What we remember, a lot of interpretive work goes on when you determine in your own mind what the other person is saying. You're filling in a lot of blanks. I mean, even at the level of phonetics, this is true. You don't really hear all the sounds. You just pick bits and pieces of it up and reconstruct what the expression is. There's a lot of internal work going on in perception. Same with visual perception. Like when I look at, there's an example of Descartes, actually. You look at, say, I look at you, I see a person, but what's actually hitting my eyeball is just saccadic motions are leading to little points of light hitting various pieces of the surface of my eye. But my mind reconstructs these and turns them into a person.
So if we then go about the externalization and questions of performance of language, which you always have said you're not terribly interested in the performance of it. You're interested in what is the competence. But I was just reading one of your great distractors, Daniel Everett, who, in terms of what you wrote something about AI and how it presents false promises. He is kind of saying that what you study is just a minute, tiny bit of what language is all about. And 99%.
From his point of view, that's uninteresting.
That's right.
From the point of view of several millennia of philosophy and linguistics, that was extremely interesting. But if he's not interested in it, that's his problem. But that's all of language and probably all of thought.
That's right. So, which leads me to the next question, which then goes slowly into politics and philosophy. If what we call thoughts, or the production of to generate expressions, why is it that the output can be totally illogical and so-called nonsense?
Yeah, easy. Just pick up the latest newspaper. You see plenty of it. That's because we're not particularly rational creatures. In fact, a good deal of modern industry is devoted to trying to prey upon our irrationality. Like what you just quoted from Dan Everett is totally irrationality, but people can say it. In fact, take advertising. What's advertising? It's a way to try to exploit your irrationality by leading you to make irrational decisions. It's very effective.
So, but you're just saying that humans are not rational; they can be totally irrational.
Happens all the time.
Happens, unfortunately, yes. But I'm always fascinated by
Plenty of professionals.
that's right. I'm fascinated by the question why that should be. I mean, take Wittgenstein, who tried to figure out that maybe language could be a sort of a logical system, but unfortunately it isn't. But why is it not a logical system?
Well, that's the early Wittgenstein.
Yeah, the early one, yes.
Tractatus, he then totally withdrew all that.
That's right. Yeah.
He wasn't really talking about language. He was talking about a relatively formalized language, one which would, as he put it, thought then actually capture the nature of the facts of the world. He gave that up as a chimera. Yeah.
All right. So are we then condemned by, like Bertrand Russell saying, that all of this is just a passing nightmare?
That was Russell.
Yeah.
Hard to deny it. That was quite a good quote.
Yes. But on the other hand, I mean, what we might be called good science, or beneficial science, has produced amazing results. So why is the negative side seems to be overcoming the positive side?
Well, it's because of human decisions. Take climate. I'm sure you read the latest IPCC report. That's science. Scientists are overwhelmingly convinced with very solid evidence that we're racing to a precipice and we're going to soon fall over it. Political leaders are racing as fast as they can to the precipice. The public mostly doesn't understand it. It's you look at public opinion studies. If you ask people to rank issues in terms of urgency, the idea that we're going to destroy ourselves in a generation or two isn't even considered an urgent issue. And you can understand why. That's not what they hear. I think, say, Republicans, their leaders are telling them, forget it, nothing's happening. As they turn on to the Murdoch news, Fox News, says it's all a liberal hoax, nothing's happening, forget about it. Well, and that's what you hear all the time. They don't trust scientists anyway. They don't trust the elites altogether. Don't trust institutions for pretty good reasons. The institutions are always screwing them. Why should they trust them? So easy for them to reach the decision it's just a liberal plot to take away our lives or something like that. So let's forget it, So look at, by now it's about 50 years. The fossil fuel companies have been working very hard to try to sow confusion about these matters, saying, well, we really don't know, haven't studied sunspots, let's go ahead with your lives and stop this liberal nonsense. Well, okay, people are flooded with this, what should they believe? In fact, the beliefs that people have are amazing when you look at them. I've just happened to be writing about some examples, but take 20th anniversary of the invasion of Iraq. Take a look at the beliefs of Americans. We know them in detail from polls. At the time of the invasion, the large majority of Americans thought that Saddam Hussein was responsible for 9/11. First of all, it's totally outlandish. not only is there no evidence, but one of there was a high level of hostility between Al-Qaeda and Saddam. But it didn't matter. That's what they were hearing, so that's what they believed.
So that just sort of continues today with the Ukraine war, doesn't it? I mean, I was just reading by this, I don't know if you know this guy called Timothy Snyder from Yale, who is now given lots of oxygen in the Guardian, who acts like some sort of the intellectual commissar, I suppose, by claiming, Putin is a fascist, Trump is a harmless idiot, and Biden and company, they're just fighting for Western democracy, and that's all there is to it.
That's the role of intellectuals throughout history. Support power. Nothing new about that.
So this idea of disseminating this fake worldview, I mean, obviously you and me, we can imagine the world as a better place. And I suppose one solution you advocated in terms of what people should do, or at least think about, is to have a system of it's not even a system, but something you call syndicalist anarchy. How can we get this across to people to, save the world from destruction?
If anybody knew the answers for the last several thousand years, they would have told us.
So are we just condemned to watch what's going on?
Oh, I think there's been, as you said before, science has made progress. There's been moral progress too. You look back at what was regarded as normal and acceptable in the past, much of it is unspeakable today, even in the recent past. So there's progress, but agonizingly slow, and plenty of regression. So you keep struggling. It's been going on for thousands of years. Take Socrates. What was he forced to commit suicide for? It was corrupting the youth of Athens by trying to get them to think, asking too many questions.
Well, that's right. But I suppose in earlier times, there wasn't the technology to, destroy the whole Earth with a few atomic bombs, etc. So is that the big difference between the past and what is happening now?
It's been a difference for the last 75 years. And now we didn't know it at the time, but that was the onset of the geological epoch that geologists now call the Anthropocene, where humans are having a highly destructive effect on the environment by now, severe enough so that in a generation or two, we may be finished.
So the impact this has, particularly on young people, can be extremely depressing, I suppose, because, it's their future.
It can be depressing for some, it's energizing for others. There's a lot of youth activism, which is trying to avert the crisis. So you can go two ways. You can say, I'm depressed, I quit, no use, or you can get involved and try to use the opportunities that exist. They're not enormous, but they do exist. Maybe you can turn it into a better world. That's been the choice all through history. Now it's more serious, but it's been the same choice all through human history.
So this could be just a very bad phase we're going through.
we're reaching what may be the final phase of human history. We now we have the capacity to destroy everything. We have ways out, but we're certainly not using them in anything like at the level that's necessary to avert catastrophe. There's still time to reverse course. I'm going to take Ukraine. It's moving up an escalation ladder. When Putin a couple of days ago said that he might think about putting tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus, that's a signal to the West. I don't know if he means it or not. Signal to the West that if you keep escalating, doing what Timothy Snyder wants you to do, we'll react, and then we'll all be gone. Now you're sending tanks, beginning to send jet planes, escalate it further, we're going to respond. Notice that Putin has not yet done in Ukraine what the United States and Britain did in Iraq. We don't talk about it here, but ask yourself, how many political leaders visited Baghdad when the US and Britain were smashing them to pieces? Well, Timothy Snyder tells you not to talk about that.
Yes, exactly. So this idea that I think maybe this is going back to the beginning, to your book, Why Only Us? For some strange reason, it seems to me that all of this is mediated through language. We are talking about it, Putin is talking about it, Zelensky is talking about it. Everybody, all actions seem to precede thought and language. So is there something in language itself that gives us that freedom of choice to be good or to be bad?
Take any non-linguistic animal, like the one that I'm petting right now, try to keep her quiet. She has a range of choices, maybe a dozen or so choices. She can try to pursue one of those choices. Can't make up new ones, except within a very narrow limit. If you don't have thought and language, it's not much you can do.
Animals follow their instincts, basically.
We do too, but one of our instincts is the ability unique to humans to acquire an infinite language and the thoughts that it constructs. That makes us different. Actually, one great evolutionary biologist, Theodore Dobzhansky, once said that every species is unique, but humans are the uniquest of all. And this is what makes us the uniquest of all, for good or bad.
Yeah, so exactly, as you say, what differentiates us from everything, all the other living species, is language. So the progress that has been made in terms of science, for example, amazing things like landing on Mars or whatever, and yet we are unable to.
Not a scientific feat. We should be careful. Didn't teach you very much.
It doesn't, no, but just the ability to do that is all predicated on language, I suppose.
How could you possibly? Could chimpanzees do it?
Yeah, obviously not, no. So the idea that the language itself, your book, Why Only Us, so it hasn't actually given us an evolutionary advantage, has it?
Well, Yes, that's why there are 7 billion of us and not many other mammals around. The only other large mammal that exists in large numbers are domesticated animals because humans raise them. In fact, there was just a recent study of the total weight of mammals on Earth. It's almost entirely humans and domesticated animals. There aren't many wild animals around.
That's right. There's the biomass of them has reduced by some enormous percentage.
Yeah.
So,
Enough.
yeah, in terms of language, then we are shooting ourselves in the foot, if not in the head.
Right, we are.
But
Enough.
But if we have the capacity to, be rational in our thinking, how is it possible that people who are in power have this tendency to, be irrational? Is this something to do with the famous saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely?
You don't get into positions of power unless you have some kind of a screw loose.
Yes.
You want to be the CEO of ExxonMobil? No rational person would. But once you're in that position, you're trapped. Yeah, there's a game. There's the rules to the game. If you don't play them, you're out. Okay. So if you decide to enter the game, you play by the rules. If you're the CEO of ExxonMobil, the rules are make profit. If that means destroy the world, kill your grandchildren, okay, you either do it or you get out, because if you don't do it, you'll be out. That's the way the rules are set up. If the institutional structures are insane, okay, they are. So you only way out is going to be to modify the institutional structures. You want to make it to Congress, you're going to have rich donors paying your way. Then you got to do what they say. Okay.
Yes. So, I mean, I like your famous saying that if you were elected president of the United States, the first thing you would do is to arrest yourself and put yourself in jail.
That's right, because you don't have a lot of choices.
That's right. Yeah. So, therefore, for example, these characters like Musk, etc., who are delving into this AI business because it promises to yield billions of dollars. In terms of linguistics, because I mean, like you said, I mean, it's all basically plagiarism of big data. But nevertheless, in terms of linguistics, they do seem to have the power to, fund research. So will theoretical linguistics, will that suffer due to this obsession with artificial intelligence in language?
Very seriously. That's where the money is. That's where the jobs are. It's going to be very hard to do serious work. Not just in linguistics. I think the other sciences will suffer too, because the appeal of just manipulating data is, I mean, first of all, it's fun for young kids playing with these things. Secondly, there's a lot of, that's where you get a job. You graduate. I mean, it's not just AI, take mathematics. MIT has a great math department. A couple of years ago, they put up a sub-discipline called financial mathematics. What's financial mathematics? It's a way to use your mathematical talents to get a job at Wall Street for 10 times as much as you'll ever get for working on number theory, in which you're manipulating ways to make trading a couple of microseconds faster. Okay, that's where the jobs are. Has a very corrupting effect.
Yes, and especially the famous, infamous example of Epstein. Wasn't he a mathematics teacher in the first place, who cottoned on to this financial mathematics, and then, of course, had the famous Lolita Express plane, where people like the Clintons and Dershowitz and Pinker were traveling on.
I don't know how much of that story is true and how much is gossip, frankly.
But well, he certainly, Epstein certainly was like you said, a person who subscribed to this financial mathematics idea and developing all sorts of algorithms for the share market.
Very minor figure. That's financial systems in the last 40 years dominate the economy. That's who runs the financialized economy. That's why you have constant crashes. Back in the 1950s and 60s, you didn't have any crashes because finance was under control. With the neoliberal revolution, it opened up the doors. Now they run things. We're right in the middle of one right now, constant crashes. Then somehow you have to move in to rescue the system from disaster. That's, again, institutional structures. Can't really blame the individuals.
But although, I mean, the individuals involved, like you say, the CEOs and what have you, they play the game out of some strange conviction, or because you say, if they don't play the game, somebody else will, so they have no choice but to play the game.
Well, I think they can even give a sound argument. Take Jamie Dimon, head of J.P. Morgan Chase, the biggest bank, funds fossil fuels and so on. I can't read his mind, but I can imagine if somebody asks him, why are you working to kill your grandchildren? He has a pretty good answer. He can say, look, if I don't do it, I'll be out. Somebody else will come in. He's not as nice a guy as I am, so he'll do even worse than I do. So I'm saving you by killing you. It's a good argument.
Yes, however insane it is, yes. But do you think, I mean, this is now a global phenomenon? I mean, now the finance guys in China and Russia just on the same wavelength?
Yeah, not necessarily finance, but they have their own monstrosities. There's lots of institutional frameworks that drive people to sociopathic actions. That's bloody history is full of it.
Yeah, I was just reading, I don't know if you like Doris Lessing, but I mean, she was a communist, towing the party line until she kind of figured out that she's been fooled, or it was a foolish thing to do. But nevertheless, she does write, quite with empathy about people who have genuine communist ideas, and these people often don't belong to the party. So is that something that comes out of this saying that to change the world, to make it a better place, you have to act as an individual without going, joining a party or any organization as such?
Well, I wouldn't say that, but I mean, I knew, in fact, even my own family were first generation immigrants. They were very close to the Communist Party or in it. They really thought they were doing good things, and they were. So if you wanted people to support, say, the Scottsboro boys who were basically judicially lynched in the United States, it's the Communist Party who supported them. You wanted people to work for civil rights or something, you go to the Communist Party. You want to do it. A lot of beliefs that were sociopathic, but in their dedication to a better world, they were quite committed.
So as Doris Lessing kind of keeps going on about, when it, for example, transpired that Stalin was as murderous as anybody, they either couldn't believe it or they actually became quite depressed about the whole situation.
Or else they said, well, yes, he's doing it, he shouldn't be, but it's for better purposes. He's got purposes that we don't know. I mean, I heard plenty of this in my childhood, and it's not hard to understand. I mean, it's ugly, but not hard to understand. How about American intellectuals or New Zealand intellectuals who believe that the United States and the Western world is working assiduously for the benefit of mankind, educated intellectuals? It's just the same as believing in the party. It's totally crazy when you look at the facts, but it's go walk to the next university. That's everybody you meet.
Well, that's right. I mean, you do get, my theory has always been that to avoid total disaster, let's say at university level, you need about 10% of dissidents that have to be tolerated, because otherwise the whole thing would come to a terrible halt anyway. So do you think you're one of the 10%?
I'd like to think so, but of course, everyone thinks they're doing the right thing.
So, I mean, you're in Arizona now, in Tucson, which is a very nice place. So the university there, obviously, you and your colleagues are the people who, are the 10%. You are possibly the dissidents or the people who do good work. So is there lots of opposition there at the moment, or are you being tolerated or even encouraged?
Well, by immediate colleagues, tolerated and encouraged. If you look at it's a state university, so it's under the control of the state legislature, which is very right-wing. They're infuriated even that I'm appointed. It was a huge battle to get the appointment through. President of the university had to fight the Republican legislature. They're still after. But immediate colleagues, fine. But of course, that's by definition. Who else would be an immediate colleague?
Okay. So how did you make the move from MIT to Tucson? How did that happen?
Well, Larry and I just decided that we'd had enough of Boston. We wanted to move somewhere else. That's partly it's just Boston gets to be a harder place to live when you're older. To try to get out in the slush and the snow, and there's no mass transportation. It's the United States after all, so it's difficult to survive if you're in those circumstances.
So you think you have made the right move?
Oh, we thought it was a very good move. It's much better life here.
Okay. Well, I've been in Tucson twice, and it is a very nice place. But like you said, the politics of the state nothing compared to Massachusetts or so how do you handle that, being in such a right-wing environment?
Well, there's actually Tucson itself is kind of an island. There's the university, other research institutions and so on. So it tends to be more or less like what you find in other major cities. But if you go out into the rural areas, it's Trump territory.
All right. Okay.
Assault rifles and that sort of thing.
So in terms of students, how do you these days encourage them to study linguistics?
By trying to make it by trying to get them to see what's interesting and exciting about it.
So
I get talks on linguistics all over the world. Plenty of people are interested. It's an exciting field.
So, I mean, I would like to think that linguistics is the ultimate science, really, because as you say, it's why only us. That's what it is. So, if you have an understanding of language, you understand humankind.
Well, what makes humans the uniquest of all?
That's right.
That's not the reason.
So are you still publishing?
A lot of new work coming out. Just gave a long series of lectures in Japan, which is one of the most active places now, on current developments, new ideas. I'll publish it pretty soon. Constant new work. It's a very exciting phase. It's hard because first of all, it's hard work. A lot of people aren't really up to it. Secondly, it's the kind of thing, to get back to what we were talking before, where nobody's going to get a job.
Unless you do functional linguistics and big data.
That's the problem, is that's where you're going to get paid. As long as the universities can, to some extent, keep their autonomy from the business world, including the world of Silicon Valley, there'll be opportunities, but it's always a struggle.
So theoretical linguistics.
Myself, I got to go off to the next talk.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, well, maybe just to wrap it up, you as the founder of biolinguistics, so to speak, the younger generation that is following you, all over the world. So biolinguistics as such, do you think this is the future, this is the present and the future of linguistics?
It's the future of linguistics if it survives as a discipline. If it becomes a form of low-level engineering, then of course not.
Well, I've always been very happy to follow your thoughts. So, well, it was great talking to you, and maybe we can repeat that again sometime.
Keep well.
Okay.
Sorry, I got to leave, but they're waiting for me at the next place.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'll see you.
Bye.